Okay. Great. All right, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for the NGSS-ESS Working Group webinar for November. Getting ahead of myself a little bit there. This afternoon's webinar is entitled, "Where Are We with NGSS Implementation?" And as you can see on the screen here, there are some reminders about Zoom tools. I think we're all so cued into Zoom by now that we don't really need those any longer. I'm going to go ahead and move forward. I am Aida Awad. I'm past president of NAGT. The NGSS-ESS Working Group is a consortium of 3 organizations: NAGT, American Geosciences Institute, AGI, and NESTA. Missy Holzer is here from NESTA. And of course, we have Bradley Cotton behind the scenes at CERC with us, who's really helping us out with the tech today. Thank you so much, Bradley. Our presenters today will be Eric Pyle, and Eric is the current president of NSTA. Welcome, Eric. And Trish Shelton, who is NSTA's Chief Learning Officer. Welcome, Trish. We will have some time throughout the course of the webinar, as well as a couple minutes at the end for discussion and question and answer. There will also be a short breakout room where we'll have an opportunity to have some deeper discussion. And if you want to go ahead and post questions or your ideas or thoughts into the chat box as we're going through the webinar, that would be wonderful. We'll be monitoring that. There will also be a post-webinar survey. Here's the link for it now. We'll also give that to you at the end of the webinar. A couple of announcements quickly. We will take December off for the holidays, and then we'll be back with you for our spring series that will begin on January 13th. We don't have a title yet, but it will be a part 2 of the very popular ESRI or ESRI webinar that ran in October. So please mark your calendar for that. Watch for registration materials to come out the beginning of December. Also, there's a needs assessment. We'll pop the link into the chat box for that. And if you have missed any of our previous webinars, they are available in full color and full length on the AGI YouTube channel. So please join us there. Again, today's webinar is entitled, "Where Are We with NGSS Implementation?" I'm going to turn things over to Trish and Eric. Take it away.
Thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen, and Eric, if you want to go ahead and start off introducing yourself, and then I'll follow after you.
Okay. Well, I look on the screen and I see many faces and names that I would recognize, and some that I hope to see more of in the future here. But as Trish says, well, as I was introduced, I am the current president of the National Science Teaching Association. And at the end of this month, I will be exactly halfway through the 3-year cycle for president-elect, president, and retiring president. But you also realize just how little time there is left to actually do everything that needs to happen. I'm a professor in the Department of Geology and Environmental Science at James Madison University, where I do a tremendous amount of work in teacher preparation. And I will say that, with respect to today's topic, say who am I with respect to NGSS? I was part of the Earth and Space Science design team that led to the materials in the framework. And then I was one of the primary reviewers for Achieve, primarily for the Earth and Space Science 2, that is more the systems one, performance expectations. I use these performance expectations as a part of the methods classes that I co-teach, as well as how I organize content for pre-service teachers of Earth Science K-12. Trish?
Thanks, Eric. I'm Trish Shelton, NSTA Chief Learning Officer, a former middle school and high school classroom teacher in an early NGSS adoption state. And I had the opportunity to work on transitioning my classroom and my approach to science teaching and learning through this lens of the framework and the NGSS for about 5 years before I came to NSTA. The last 4 out of the last 5 years, I sort of straddled the classroom and worked nationally. I was one of the original Achieve, Equip, facilitators for the Equip rubric, and also did a lot of work with Achieve around implementation and the meetings around there. And I'm really excited today to share some thinking and some of the highlights from the Taking Stock Summit. And so this slide is to again thank the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Senior Program Officer, Tanya, here pictured here, who sponsored this convening. But before we dive into the Taking Stock piece, Eric and I were really wondering about our audience. So Eric, what do you want to know about our audience?
Well, really, what's your personal framework or NGSS timeline? Remembering that the framework itself first came out in 2012 and NGSS in 2013. Really, what was your first encounter with this? Were you part of the development at some point? Was this a new thing that came along? Was it a professional learning opportunity for you? Just go ahead and put in the chat, just an approximate year, and then what was the circumstance, the context of your first encounter with NGSS? So just take a moment and put that in the chat.
Love this, Eric, getting to know our audience through this lens. Ted. Awesome. Some shout outs to the conference. Oh, I miss face-to-face conferences.
Well, we are coming back to those. So
that's right.
We have had, go ahead.
No, we have some lead state reviewers.
All right.
Another early adoption state.
Nice. That's interesting. Early 2014-ish in undergraduate education classes. Okay.
And we have lots of classroom teachers starting at different points along the way. This is awesome.
Yeah. Well, it's just as there is many different levels of encounter or people here, roles, there are different levels of encounter. And so we're I like to hearing what colleagues were doing as they were leading the statewide standards review and recommendations. So some of it was at the classroom level, some of it at the methods student level, some of it, there's one through accreditation, really sort of every bit across the line here. From that whole 9 years, actually more than 10 years, as we'll see in a moment, from the very inception of this.
Awesome.
So, good.
Okay, well, let's jump right in then. You see here on the bottom right here, I was one of this is the committee that was convened for this year-long or school year-long Taking Stock initiative. And our committee was charged with designing a convening that would serve as a setting to consider the implementation of the NGSS and framework-based standards across all states and territories, to identify the successes and challenges, and also identify areas where additional resources and work are needed. So hence the Taking Stock. So as an initial first step, we revisited all of the reports related to the framework to ground our thinking. And Eric and I are going to highlight some of those in just a minute and remind everybody or show some people for the first time where you can access them for free if you'd like. We also considered themes across the recommendations from these reports. We considered insights from listening sessions that we held with stakeholders in the community. We shared our own experiences with implementation efforts. And in this group, that you might have noticed, there's leaders, researchers, teachers, as we all considered how we might frame the meeting. And so I just want to acknowledge that my honor at being part of the group and also my appreciation for all that work. And you see here what came out of our work over the summer were these objectives for the convening. And then also that this Taking Stock actually, as I mentioned, is spreading over the course of the school year. And so in October 14th and 15th, we had 2 days of virtual meetings. The next one is actually December 8th. And if you're interested in attending, I'm going to drop the link for you to register for free. It's virtual, and there'll be some more panel discussions and breakout groups starting to pull all the pieces together. All the recordings for the first 2 meetings are also available. So I'm going to highlight some of the things that happened in those meetings, but I encourage you, if you're interested, to go back and watch the pieces of the recordings that you would like. Starting after in the new year, in February, there's going to be some coffee chat type sessions and some more listening sessions. And so those will also be posted on the website that I'm going to drop, and those are all open to the public. And then finally ending up with a face-to-face convening in April. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight right now were the design elements that and really focus a little bit of discussion here today about, just like that equity is at the core of the framework and the core of the next generation science standards, it was the center of our thinking about this convening. And we talked a lot about, in the 10 years since the framework had been released, that our collective understanding of equity has evolved. And it's been a principal element in the National Academies reports that I referenced earlier. Our group acknowledged that equity can sometimes be used, it is a word that has many meanings, and sometimes is leveraged in relation to issues of access, or as a phrase that we pair with thinking about the way we design learning experiences or meet the needs of all learners. So when we convened our panels and did the panel prep, we did ask participants to think about equity and implementation efforts, but we also challenged them to avoid using equity as a catch-all and to leverage specific examples that help us connect to how they were using the term. So I just wanted to point that out, and if you watch the recordings. And then we also really pulled to the forefront attending to coherence. And what we mean by that is thinking about implementation of science and considering how aligned and coherent supports an expectation of ongoing collaborative efforts to understand and implement changes that are key to making these 3-dimensional standards come alive, this vision come alive. And so we want to consider where we've seen successes in coherence, and also where efforts have been constrained. And then finally, an important part of stock taking was hearing from a diversity of voices. So the panels reflect a balance of practitioners and researchers from various sectors. And I'm hopeful that if you go back and look at the recordings, you'll see faces and names that you might be familiar with, but also ones that you might not be familiar with. And there's also a chat archive that's posted on the website, and there's all kinds of beautiful voices in that chat. It was a very robust chat. And I'm going to share also a resource document, because there were hundreds of resources shared in the chat, and somebody has done the work of compiling all of them on a Google Doc that I'll share with you at the very end today. So really quick, this was day 1 of the 2 days. So you can take a quick look and see what some of the topics were. Also, as I mentioned, there was a very interactive chat, there was Q&A, and there were Slido polls, some of which I've grabbed screenshots of and put into the presentation today, but all of those are linked as a PDF on the website for this Taking Stock Summit. And we also were encouraged to share our thinking to the hashtag #SciStandards, which is still active. So you can jump in there and take a look at that. So with that, Eric, I'm gonna turn it over to you to frame some conversation around the vision.
Okay. Well, if you've got a number, if this has a number of builds to it here, but of course this, we mentioned this early on, but if you haven't actually explored the National Academy Press, you can find all of these documents that and more that are available for free download. They are PDFs, and I'm sure National Academies Press will be happy to sell you a paper copy if you have to have one, but I have found them very useful just downloading them all for free, and you don't even have to give away any information. But you have the framework at the beginning, the next generation science standards there. And again, I always like how that frames, it says, if you have questions about these, go back to the framework. And then you see assessments, implementation guides, designs for curricular materials, science and engineering at 6 through 12, but also science and engineering preschool through elementary grades. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. When you start to look at these things, really, they are the library that really every state, every district ought to have available at some level. And they are the things that if you get lost, you can always refer back to these things as you go through. And it's not just a local phenomenon, locally here or there. 44 states and the District of Columbia that are listed have adopted or have adapted NGSS in some way, shape, or form. My personal opinion is my state, Virginia. If there's anybody from Virginia, the VSELA presentation I gave on Monday, they all laughed when I said Virginia is a crypto adopter. So even though it might not explicitly say they are adopters, it is certainly influencing science education in a pretty dramatic way here. Trish, you want to switch? Next slide. There you go. And so what I'd ask you here, okay, is, look at this timeline. Look at this timeline of all of these events. Yes, the framework came out in 2012. The work actually started well before that. Don Haas and I were actually talking about this at the Stannis meeting a couple of weeks ago. What was our timeline? When did we first start working on this? And remembering that, like many other instances, it is typical that the earth science people kind of get called last. And then that was the case with the Earth and Space Science design team. But you can see, and so just think, where were you at each of these points in time? And if it pops into your mind, go ahead and put it in the chat. Where were you at these points in time? Yes, woohoo, we're science people. Yeah, so where were you in 2011? Think about your previous answer to this question. What was your personal timeline? And go ahead and put something in the chat if you can think, where was I when these things were going on? So Brian was in the classroom for all of them. And so Brian, were you aware that any of this was going on?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, a little bit. I remember hearing bits and pieces that things were going to be changing, but never any details until maybe about five years ago.
Yeah. So I like Julie's finishing your doctorate, and I can honestly say that in 1995 I was finishing my doctorate, and Mike Padilla, and if any of you know Mike Padilla, he's a past president of NSDA, and he's done a lot with middle school education. He kind of came into the graduate student office and threw down a public draft of what was then the National Science Education Standards. Funny how history repeats itself, huh? Okay. Pre-service prep programs and so on. Yes.
Okay, awesome. So do you want to move on or?
Yeah, let's move on.
Awesome. So going back to the summit, you might see some, to Eric's point, people that you recognize here on this slide. They set the tone for the day in talking about the vision to reality. And I really felt like it was such a strong session. So if anything, I encourage you to go back and watch the recording to this first session if you didn't get a chance to see it. But some of the things that bubbled up out of this was the challenges to implementation. So Eric and I made a Menti poll that I'm gonna share the link to. I just shared in the chat. So if you would click on that link and share what do you think is the biggest challenge in implementation of three-dimensional standards? And I'll click here so we can see some answers hopefully pop in here.
You have to log in to see the results.
Don't think so. Here, let me try to refresh.
Oh, there we go. No, there we go.
Oh, good job, Eric. So we have, oh, time is sticking out there.
Mm-hmm.
Give it another, I'll wait like 10 more seconds and refresh again, Eric. Good call. There we go.
Wow.
Awesome. Well, let's take a look at what the hundreds of people at the audience said. Oh my gosh, look. Same giant thing in the middle. So feel free to share in the chat box any of your reaction. Eric and I've designed a couple of the polls that the participants at the summit experienced, and we have them here for you guys. And then right after that, we have a slide for comparison. So did you want to add some thinking there, Eric?
Oh yeah, I just, it's amazing how time, professional learning, high quality materials, these things stand out. And it's just like, do we not scream it loud enough? Do we have a mountain high enough to stand on it to say that, time is the school in which we learn, but time is the fire in which we burn. So
yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, the second panel here, and again, I just wanted you to sort of see who was in the room and think about to make your decision if you would like to go back and listen to those. This particular panel talked about the landscape of implementation. And after that panel, one of the reflections was, what is the most challenging instructional shift? So a version of what we just shared, and I'm going to drop that poll in the chat box there. Now I know I have to refresh. So if you wouldn't mind jumping over there, our audience, active audience, and at this time, you as participants will need to select your most challenging shift and then choose the next most challenging until you've ranked all 7 is the way that this poll is going to work.
Trish, I think we need a different link for that second poll. It looks like it's the same as the first one. Do you have a different link?
Let me try again. Maybe
Thanks.
Thank you for that. I think that was Missy. Okay, how about that one? Is that different? Yes, that's different. The most challenging instructional shift.
Hey, it is the right one coming up now.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Yes.
We got it.
Great.
So after you rank them in order, you can submit your results. Oh, wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. What are you seeing there, Eric?
One of the things that I see is maybe earth science instructors aren't so different.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah, give it one more shot, or are we
Yeah.
good to go?
We'll give it one more.
Reload.
Okay, so take a look at that screen and let's see what the participants said. We have letting go of content coverage, integrating the 3 dimensions, and phenomena based is our top 3. Oh, wow, look, letting go of content coverage, a different second one, supporting student sense making, and then phenomena based there, but integrating 3 dimensions was pretty close there. You just notice that it went to the second page because of the way that the PDF displayed, but pretty similar results. That's interesting, huh?
Isn't it? Isn't it just? Again, I think, regardless of where we're coming from, we are facing some of the same challenges as we go forward.
So moving on to day 2, this was a 2-day summit. You can see what the day opened with centering the student experience, a panel, and then there were 2 different panels on professional learning. A panel that Vic Sampson led about pre-service professional learning, and then a panel about in-service that I moderated. And then we pulled all of those people together in a big giant group and had some audience Q&A followed by some discussion. So this was our panel on centering student experience. You can see there. And they talked about the goal of the framework, and there's some really good commentary in the chat here about student experience and equity. And so, go ahead, Eric.
You go back one slide just for a second here too. I just wanted to point out that there are some members of this group that have been part of this growing movement with geoheritage and geoheritage sites, and really how they help to galvanize exactly that highlighted portion, issues related to personal and community priorities and things that are pertinent to their interests. So we are squarely where we ought to be with some of that work.
Awesome. Thank you for pointing that out. So that might be a really good thing to add here too. What strategies have you seen or used to center student experience? So anyone who has used that strategy, that the resources that Eric just mentioned, we'd love to hear from you in the chat. Or what are some other pieces or strategies that you've used?
So again, think about this as how are you engaging students with phenomena, with those practices? Not so much the time, obviously it's the time that is the biggest factor here, but what are you doing? What are you trying that is centering the experience with NGSS, while centering students' experience with NGSS? Okay, good call, Ada. There's a geoheritage connection. There's an archived webinar video from May 2021. I actually just received an email today from National Academies Press. I knew this was out earlier, but the report proceedings of a meeting called GeoHeritage 2. And that has some fascinating ways, though it's not strictly written with NGSS because it's phenomena based, you would be able to make those connections right away.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep watching the chat box for some more pieces, but we have one more poll. Then Eric is going to present an NSTA survey that we did going into this convening that I think you'll find interesting. And then we want to give you guys some time to discuss. So we're going to go into some breakout rooms. So this poll, our last one, and you guys are experts now at the ranked choice poll. This is another ranked choice. But what is the most important place to focus efforts and resources to support implementation? So that's been bubbling up a little bit in our chat today. In this taking stock, we wanted to surface the things where we need to focus more attention, or that we're not quite there, and what the things that we need to build, because the framework and the NGSS weren't supposed to be something stagnant that had all the answers all back in 2011, 2012, and 2013, but instead something that we can add new research as we grow. So what are the most important places to focus our efforts?
I'm looking as these develop, Trish.
Oh, look at that.
Yes, indeed. I like Julie's response here. Routine, see, think, wonder, predict, observe, explain. Driving questions, read, generate, sort, solve. Nice.
I'm
Okay.
gonna
Give it one more reload.
One more reload. Pretty similar there.
At least the first two, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Go ahead and advance.
Okay, so here is what that group said. Look at how in sync we are. That's really powerful. So this is how they rank them. And
Yeah.
so now let's hear from NSTA's stakeholders that, Eric, can you tell us about this survey and
Yeah.
I'll click through?
Yeah, no, this is really important. I mean, we have been cooperating, NSTA has been cooperating with the academies on these things, several items, including this one. And one of them, this is a very interesting time for NSTA because we're really trying to make sure that we have the teacher voice in a lot of what we want to do. I mean, what's the ground truth? So we sent out a survey. We simply asked, some of the same things we asked you, or slightly different versions. What are the main challenges and how to connect students in those communities? What do we want to say to our leadership? You saw that was one of the in the higher priority areas. But what are the most important features that should be there as a part of high quality, excellent science instruction? And so here are the results. Now, of course, this is in the middle of pandemic. People have lots of things coming across their transom, so to speak, but we did get a pretty interesting representation across the board in terms of what did our members say. And this information not only feeds back into the organization of the summit and everything, it's also a part of our strategic planning process, which is nearly complete, actually. We hope to have NSTA strategic plan next month. Okay. And you look at those things, again, just from a qualitative standpoint, word cloud, teachers that were much more elementary oriented. And if you think about that thing we did previously, what was the biggest thing? And that was time. And, I challenge you to tease out, well, what kind of time? Is it instructional time? Is it professional learning time? Is it planning time? What is the time that you need? Certainly for elementary grades, having the appropriate curriculum, but the resources to carry these things out are important. At the middle and high school level, though, you can see students become much more, that is, grounded in the student experience, and you see phenomena start to take on a larger role there off to the right-hand side. So there is a shift, some differences across those. And so what are some of the messages, the important messages for leaders is that, not only, we all would agree that science is important and should be a priority, but none of these things really are going to come as any surprise to you. That is, we need the professional learning. We need those resources here. And time is defined both as planning and in the schedule to actually deliver these things. Again, none of these things should come as any surprise for you, but what might come as a surprise if you haven't looked at it yet, over the summer, National Academies released a call to action for science education. And one of the first priorities, this is really meant as a policy guiding document, is to really elevate science to the same level as English language arts and mathematics in terms of the curriculum. Really, it is in the national interest to have science raised to that level. And as we would all agree here in this audience, don't forget the earth science, don't call the earth science people to the table last. Okay, Trish. And so again, what does excellent instruction consist of? What does that look like? I mean, again, none of these should come as any great surprise to you as you look at this, but it is centered on the student's experience. The other thing I would challenge you to say is, as you look at each one of these, and as we looked at that earlier poll in terms of some of the priorities, what do you think, what are the barriers, or what are the things that you think you'd need? Are there any of these that you look at this list here that are inaccessible through professional learning experiences? Are there any of these that you can't do through professional learning? I mean, I think about all the things that are face-to-face that get us on track, that get us engaged. the meetings that I have been to, the conferences that I have been to since we started traveling again, this universal feeling of connection, of collaboration, and how do we share and get some of these things out. So which one of these you could put in the chat if you look at this from a professional learning standpoint, which one of these or which of these should have the highest priority? And then it also challenged you to say, how much sustained effort do you think that's going to take? So, you drop it in the chat if you think about it for just a moment. How much sustained effort and where should the highest priority go from the standpoint of earth science instruction? Okay, Trish.
Yeah, awesome. So our last move before we go to breakout groups, I talked about this. This was the group on the teacher professional development panel, and we had lots of representation from the states to districts to classrooms to informal in that particular discussion. So you can grab that archive and watch it if you'd like, but we'd love to go to breakout rooms, and you see the two questions that we'd love for you to chat about on the screen. Eric, can you tell us a little more about these questions? And I'm going to drop them in the chat box.
Okay.
So when you go to the breakout room, you'll have them there for you.
Yeah. So this is kind of along the lines of what our previous discussion, just in terms of you saw how you stacked up, your responses stacked up with what people attending the summit had. But, looking at our audience, what do you see as specific barriers to implementation of earth and space science performance expectations? And maybe I have phrased this a little bit too narrowly, but it is actually, as you go about your work, whether you're in the classroom, whether you're working with classroom teachers for professional learning or pre-service teachers, what do you see as the biggest barriers? And I challenge it, there is a real challenge at work here, and it's not uniform across the country, but there are teachers now that are having to teach or having to integrate within their instruction earth and space science concepts, those things, the performance expectations, things for which they might have little or no experience with. And so what do you think, what would be the priority to get them to better be able to integrate those earth and space science concepts? And really, if you think there's any geographic, if your gut tells you there's any geographic distribution to that, go ahead and talk about that within your breakout group. And so we'll have, what did we say, Trish, about 8 minutes here? And then come back and we will talk about each group, what each group saw as part of this. So, and I think at this point, Bradley, if you would eject people from the main room and drop them into their breakout rooms, we can go from there. Okay. So my role with this summit is I get to listen to it, whereas Trish is on the inside here. Certainly between the two of us, we can communicate some of this information back up the chain, and you all might have the opportunity in these coffee chats as well. But very quickly, and mindful of our time, I want to save time for Q&A. If each room could just give us quickly a top answer to number 1 and number 2, and we will call for volunteers to do it. So somebody go ahead. Room 1, I'll just go down the room number. How about that? Room 1.
Hey guys, I was in room 1, and our focus, both Christy and I are both from New York State, and we have our core curriculum that we're currently following, and it really kind of handcuffs us as to trying new things with time.
Okay.
To get ready for a state assessment at the end of the year. So it's hard to even try to do some good 3-dimensional design. Okay. Waiting for the new change to come about, at least here in New York State.
Okay.
Number 2, we didn't get to.
Okay.
I guess we did a little bit, but not as much. That was the big focus.
Maybe that's one just to think about right away. So how about room 2? Volunteers from room 2?
I don't know what my room number was. That may have been us. So I'll just pop in. Hi. So the largest barrier is the fact that there are very few earth science credentialed teachers that are out there across the nation. And then number 2, we talked a lot about, as earth science professionals, that we can help to create the crosswalks for those chemistry, physics, and biology teachers that are challenged to teach earth science.
Excellent starting point. Great. Okay. Room 3? Or another room?
Christina or Melanie, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll go. So I think our group, we talked about several things, but one barrier is just the fact that somebody that has a different subject knowledge background is working with the earth science topic. So it's such a challenge of where do you get that information? How do you fold it in? And then also looking at it, trying to make the teacher even making that connection of why is this here? How does it fold in? And like, if I'm teaching chemistry, how does that come together? And that there are ways to do it, but that's just going to be a big hurdle mentally for a lot of folks. And we were then talking about some other ways to address that.
Okay. 2 more rooms, room 4. Who was there?
I don't remember.
Go ahead.
I don't remember which room we were on, but Julie and I were on opposite coasts and opposite experiences. I'm in California, where we are looking at, in high school, our 3-course model with earth and space science embedded into biology, chemistry, and physics. And she's in New York, where there's this dedicated earth science course, but we both had the same big barrier, which is that there's not good materials available for either of our courses that are aligned with NGSS and that fit our needs. And that was kind of a big stumbling block. And she mentioned that one of the things she helps her pre-service teachers work on is vetting, how to vet resources most effectively. And I thought that was something that's really valuable.
That is I do something similar. So that is excellent. So, and then the last room.
Okay, so along the lines of barriers, Janet brought up an excellent point, and she said inertia. And we have to be leery of inertia. And she brought up the example of those wonderful NSF projects from the 1960s and how we just came to a roadblock with them, that the energy that was behind them just didn't facilitate the program forward. And then all of a sudden they kind of fizzled out. And so that's just something as a kind of it's a barrier, but it's also something of a warning sign that we have to, be forewarned that we can't let this happen. And I think we're pretty wise to that right now, because we're in a continual process of moving forward and moving forward and moving forward. And we're recognizing that there are these stumbling blocks. So, but it's always good to reflect back on that issues such as inertia. Another barrier that was brought up was, especially for our K-5 audience, is assessments and the focus of assessment on ELA and math. And then with such a strong focus on those, it's very difficult to get the science in there and do it well. And then finally, for the second one, the professional learning needs, it was brought up that professional development is needed for those educators that do not have the earth science background, whether it's content support, and it likely is the content support as well as the pedagogical support to develop good PCK. And it should be centered on real life problems so that they can make those connections and then also help their students to make connections.
Excellent. Thank you. No, I think there are several themes that you can take forward, Trish, as you enter into the next committee discussion. Trish did mention that there was a resource page that was developed. It was actually a Google Doc, and it's amazing to take a look at these things. Some of the things you'll recognize, but like any good collection of things like this, there are some good things that you might not have known about. I certainly found a few things that I did not know about looking at that. And so finally, the next session is December the 8th, 2021. You'll notice the time. It is 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. So those of you that are on the West Coast can participate at a reasonable hour. If you're in Hawaii, like Rick Jones has been on many calls, there's nothing reasonable we can do for him. So nevertheless, there you go. And I think that's it, Trish.
Absolutely. So
We're going
turn
to
it
turn
back.
things over to Missy here real quick. I think there are a couple of questions, but I think we only have time for one. So Missy, take it away.
Oh, gee, only one. Let's see. So a couple of participants noted that implementation efforts do not seem to be taking hold as firmly as we might have expected. Do you have any ideas for reinvigorating classroom implementation efforts, areas where we can encourage rapid growth? And that was a Trish question.
Yeah, I was hoping
Okay.
it was because I've got some ideas, but I don't want to overrun her.
Well, I'll weigh in, and then Eric can come in behind me. I think that is the purpose of the call to action in combination with this summit, even though the funding is from two different organizations, is that not just COVID and the things that have happened in society during that time, but that certainly has been a factor that we see how critical the need is for scientific literacy for everybody in our country and our society. And so this is the time to reinvigorate an investment in that and advocacy for that, which also includes the research and the current standards and the things that drive the conversation. What would you add, Eric?
Well, I'd add a couple of things. First of all, in the call to action, they don't neglect assessment as a part of that. Assessment is not an afterthought. If we want to raise science to the same level as ELA or mathematics, we are going to have to embrace assessments that support that as well and what they can tell us. Now, the other side I would say is the student-centered experience, how you can really, I think, reinvigorate things or get that energy going is where we look at the student experience and what students are concerned about and what they will wrap their heads around and run with, basically. And I know one of the things that we've been doing at NSTA, Vernier Scientific has actually sponsored a series of webinars that are on the weekends. I think we're in, Trish, I believe, the third iteration of those. They are dealing with multicultural issues, social justice issues, and so on in science in a broad sense. But I'm actually working with Eleanor Snow, and she has two Einstein Fellows, and we're hoping to have some things that are directly related to earth science and its issues, like social justice and water resources, or social justice and natural hazards. These are the things that really capture students' attention. These are the things that captures adults' attentions as well, but they provide a level of energy that might not otherwise be there.
Thank you very much for your thoughts on that. That was a really important question, I think, to ask. And there is a question sitting in the chat box that if anyone has resources that you could point to for that one, looking for full year course materials for ESS specifically. So I'm going to jump back in here. We just got a couple of minutes and will take us home from here. Missy, can you see my slides?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you so much. As a reminder on announcements, January 13th will be our next webinar. It will start off our spring series, and no title yet, but it will be part 2 of the ESRI or ESRI webinar that took place last month. So please join us for that. And as mentioned before, please do take a look at the AGI YouTube channel. All of our webinars are archived there. There's some great ones to watch over the holidays while you're just sort of kicked back and relaxing. The post-webinar survey, if somebody could grab that link, maybe Bradley, you could grab that link and drop it into the chat for me. I'd appreciate that. If you do need a certificate of completion or participation for this webinar, please do fill that out. It's the only way you can get that certificate. And if you don't need the certificate, we very much value your feedback on our webinars. So please do drop into that survey and give us your feedback. The NAGT portion of this NGSS-ESS working group wants to invite you to all of the NAGT webinars in the series. We have about one every week. So boy, there's a lot there to dig into and enjoy. And I invite you to join us at NAGT. Missy, you want to talk about NESTA?
Yeah, so NESTA is National Earth Science Teachers Association and invites you to join us. We have our monthly e-news, quarterly journal, The Earth Scientist, and an active presence at the national meetings. And we'd love to have you.
And then the third partner, Ed Robeck from AGI, and unfortunately Ed couldn't be with us today. He's at another event, but AGI does have quite a few resources, including Earth Science Week, which was just held last month. But there are lots of Earth Science Week resources and other resources that are applicable to NGSS-ESS on their website. So please do check out their resources as well. On behalf of Ed and Missy and Bradley and myself, I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon. We look forward to seeing you on our next webinar, and we'll hang around for a couple minutes if anybody has further questions. Thanks a lot. Have a great rest of your day.